Did you all see the story that Palworld hit 32 million total players? Like, Nintendo's definitely not happy about this, right? Like, they have tried everything to stop this game. You know, they've hit Palworld with lawsuits. They told them to change their mechanics. I mean, at this point, nothing is stopping this game or slowing it down. I literally, you could say that Palworld is the Godzilla to Nintendo, and everybody at Nintendo is just like, run! It's Godzilla! And you know what? Mazel tov to Palworld, right? Like, that is a game that is only a year old. And somehow, this studio was able to make one of the best Pokemon games on the market without being a Pokemon game. Like, Palworld has done so well that, you know, there's a huge Nintendo Pokemon Direct that's coming out next week, and Game Freak's promoting it, and they're like, you don't want to miss it. And I feel like Palworld has raised the bar for player expectations so much for this genre that in no world can Nintendo come out and just be like, we're re-releasing Pokemon Red, and our next generation Pokemon game is just going to be just like Arceus, because I feel like the genre has moved past it. Like, Pokemon used to be in control of the pace, but I feel like Palworld has just been like, nah, we got this, fam. You're kind of behind us at this point. Like, Palworld has done such a great job showing that the genre can be so much more. And a Pokemon game where you catch and battle and train, but then you blend in some Animal Crossing, some survival mechanics, and base building mechanics, and open world. I mean, it just sounds awesome. Like, I want a Pokemon game like this. But, you know, this news did get me wondering, right? Like, 32 million is nothing to bat an eye at. I mean, it's a huge milestone for the developer. And if I were Nintendo, I would seriously be looking at these numbers and realizing that, like, there's a big demand for a Pokemon-style game outside of the Nintendo ecosystem, which I think is like a no-brainer for all of us who talk about video games. But, like, could Nintendo and Game Freak be talking about, like, maybe it's time to release some of the Pokemon games away from the Switch? Maybe we put a Pokemon game on PlayStation. Maybe we put a Pokemon game on Xbox. Maybe we put a Pokemon game on mobile devices or on PCs. You know, Pokemon on mobile has been a massive success for the company. You look at, like, Pokemon Go or Pokemon TCG Pocket, both of those games absolutely killing it for the company. And I think that they've shown that Pokemon can thrive outside of the Nintendo ecosystem. And you look at these Palworld numbers, and you've got to wonder, like, hey man, what if you just re-released Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and mobile? How many more millions of copies could you sell? Because it's not like anybody's going to the Nintendo Switch or the Switch 2 to be like, I'm going to play Pokemon Red, right? Like, no one's running to that console to play it. So you could put it on these other platforms without jeopardizing the Nintendo platform. And I guess the other side of this too is, like, Pokemon Red and Blue, based off the statistics we found, it's only sold 31 million copies. So Palworld, with their first game, has already surpassed the original Pokemon games, which is wild, man, because that Red and Blue number feels very, very low when you compare it to Palworld. And I gotta say, Pokemon has to be having these conversations. And if they're not, shame on them. Like, shame on Pokemon and shame on Nintendo. I say this as, like, someone who's in business and who's in sales and works on the marketing side, and, like, I understand what a market does. But at the same time, I say this because it makes sense to me. But for Nintendo, 100% could see this never happening. Like, I could see Nintendo just being like, no, absolutely not. There will never be a Pokemon game outside of the Nintendo ecosystem. And it makes me sad because I feel like there's just so many other players who would enjoy playing these games on their preferred platforms. And, you know, I guess you have Xbox, who's kind of bringing their games to other platforms. PlayStation's bringing their games to PCs. And it just feels like ecosystems are super fluid now. Like, games that used to be exclusive to one side are now able to be played in multiple different areas. And I feel like for Nintendo, yes, you're trying to sell your brand new Switch 2 and you want everybody to buy it, but also it's like, hey man, there's players who don't want to buy the Switch 2. Like, how do you get the games to them, and how do you sell more copies over there? So I wouldn't be surprised, but I would also be super surprised if this happens, which is a complete oxymoron. But Nintendo, if you're watching, please and thank you. Please bring the original Pokemon games to other platforms. I think that would be super cool.